Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Night Shadows. Tonight we got kind of a special program. We're going to be talking about Mars and Tithonia and AI and where this is all headed. And I wanted to read some excerpts from, first of all, Psalm 2. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath and vex them in his sore displeasure. So what we're looking at here on Psalm 2 is a worldwide global conspiracy that no one wants to believe in. Hence, Psalm 2 is the psalm that nobody seems to know is even there, and it is the very foundation of everything of what we're coming up upon, which is Daniel's 70th week, which is exactly when the Lord vexes them in his wrath and all but destroys the planet. And then there's another one I want to bring because it dovetails into Psalm 2. It's really the culmination of where AI and the beehive mentality that the globalists are trying to bring in, this is where it ends up. And you can think of silent weapons for quiet wars, which we'll get into. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the number, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. And here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And the last one I want to read to you is out of James, chapter 5, verse 4. Behold, the hire of the laborers, who has reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabbath. You're talking. The reason I bring that up is because of the tax thing. A lot of people do not realize IRS, IMF, all these outfits are sham operations. According to the Lord on high, the creator of it all, he calls them basically criminals because everything they do is by fraud. It's a fraudulent operation from start to finish. And that's very, very important. The other thing people need to know is the IRS is, in actuality, part of the communist plank to take over America, and Larry and I have for a long time warned you that this is a communist takeover. So don't let this tax stuff fool you by any way or mean, because it's garbage. It's a communist plank in the first place, and it's a fraud according to the creator of the entire universe, and that ought to be sufficient for most people. Jesus said, however, pay your taxes. If they're telling you to pay your taxes, go ahead and pay them. Every dollar they collect is going to be on their own heads, and how they use it is going to be on their own heads. And if they knew where they were going, it would be instantly suspended overnight and come up with some new voluntary system. People realize government costs a lot of money to run, but it's way, way, way overblown. And the power to tax is the power to destroy. People should really realize that, and they should believe what the Bible tells them about all of this, but evidently they don't. Hi, Larry. How are you doing?
Hey, Stuart. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, the Bible's pretty well laid all this out, but again, because people are so apostate from Scripture, they have no clue as to what's really going on.
Well, one clue that we could talk about tonight is, and actually the information came out today when Congress revealed the new tax plan that they're about to vote in, they believe, possibly Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. President Trump had said that he wanted to completely shut off the Johnson Amendment, and that amendment is the one that controls the churches. And
yes.
That was supposed to be in this tax bill. However, Congress took it on themselves to remove that because they wanted to leave the churches under some type of thumb of control where, ironically, you can't go to church and talk about candidates and voting, And so anyway, apparently Congress today removed the Johnson Amendment removal from the tax bill. So they appear to be upholding Psalm 2, the Psalm 2 war.
Yeah, they can't stop it. These people have already made their decisions. The die is cast, and they're going to a very horrible place that they don't even know exists, probably don't even care if it does or not. And how do I word this? God's agenda is going to be fulfilled. No one is going to stop it. They can plot all they want, but the Lord already allowed for all of their plotting. He knows perfectly well every decision, every government ruler makes. He knows it's all written down. He has his agenda. He's going to fulfill it, and he says, no one's going to stop me, not the UN, not anybody. I've stretched out my hands upon the nations, and I'm going to do my will, and no one is going to stop me. So people really do need to realize that there really is a God in the heavens. All of this is all part of his agenda and plan, and he gave us a way to escape out of what's coming. And if people don't take that way of escape, I guess, well, what do? Nothing you can do about it. But, yeah, you're right. They don't want the churches or people like Tom Moore and others of his ilk. This spiritually was probably a vote against the Creator. I'm not trying to put Moore into that category, but spiritually speaking, because he stood for the Ten Commandments, the world doesn't like it. They spend more money on Halloween than they do on Christmas anyway, though. I guess for a couple of years now they've done that. But that rule, the Johnson Amendment, does allow the preachers to speak from the pulpit. But if I was a preacher, I would not be what do they call that, 401k? No, that's not it.
401c3, isn't it?
Yeah, 401c3, yeah. And they're getting tax exemption. I would forego all tax exemption and speak the truth. Because if you don't speak the truth, you're going to be in a lot of trouble with the Lord anyway. So where do you think this is headed? It didn't seem like they changed a whole lot, not really.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up one other thing that came out today, too. Trump today went to the FBI headquarters and gave a speech, but what's interesting, he also gave us something in the garden today about what is happening in Chicago, and we've talked about Chicago before because he said every 2 hours somebody's shot in Chicago, and they're actually doing nothing about it. And Mayor Emanuel of Chicago has declared Chicago a Trump-free zone, and at the same time, get this, Stuart, a Trump-free zone. But now they're asking the UN to come in and maybe use peacekeepers or handle Chicago and leave Trump and his government out of it. What do you think?
Well, this is part of that ruler against ruler, and people need to read what Jeremiah has to say about ruler against ruler because it's reached its apex. It can't go any higher. You've got cities, You've got states that are against the federal government. We've had warnings from a Russian fellow scientist who said that America was going to break up. Dmitry Duduman, I think, implied that America would break up. And this is where we're headed. Divide and conquer. This is all Illuminati. Psalm 2, kings and rulers of the earth. Nobody's exempt. So it's going to go this way, and it's going to get really, really nasty and very, very dark. But Chicago is very, very interesting in that that's the place of Obama, and it's like the Lord is showing that when Obama comes into power, the whole country is going to be like Chicago is. It's almost like it's symbolic. And, like you said, a murder every couple of hours. And maybe this is why we have all those reports of Mothman. In fact, you just sent me another one, I think, on that. And we keep getting more and more of those kind of reports. So something is really, really going on in Chicago that these Mothman sightings like Port Pleasant down there had just before the bridge collapse. Only I think this is going to be far, far worse. Okay, here's the thing you sent me. Let me read part of this. Reports of flying beings encased in shrouds or cocoons are fascinating and possibly a type of bio-UFO. Here are a few reports. Now, this came from California. This is not Chicago, so they're beginning to appear everywhere. I was in a friend's backyard, and he suddenly starts telling me that he had been mowing his lawn and just by happen caught something out of the corner of his eye. He looked up to see what he immediately called a flying man. He looked at it for 4 or 5 seconds, yelled to his brother who was working with him to come quickly and see this thing. His brother ignored him. So then he ran over and dragged him to the spot. His brother could not see it and walked away. He watched for a few seconds and again went and dragged his brother to the spot, which time neither of them could see it. Now, what's interesting, he says it was probably about 7 feet tall in a copper-colored fitted shell, metallic-looking reflective material. What do you think of these kind of things? Larry, you've had supernatural or paranormal encounters down there where you are. I mean, there's been quite a few of them. It seems like that area of Oklahoma is noted for it.
Yeah, that's very true. And of course, this incident you're referring to was California, but also they're having at the same time as the situations in Chicago with the Mothman sightings and the flying entities, they're also having reptilians appearing in Florida. So, I mean, it's beginning to spread. It reminds me of a time that even Red Elk talked about that we would begin to see very strange things happening all around. And, of course, he attributed some of it to the thinning of the veil, but yes, we are seeing the most anomalous things. And I think the people, the belief of people now, just like that kid's brother, they don't believe you. I mean, anymore. I used to I'd see so many UFO activity situations. People say, well, where's the picture? So I took pictures of them, and then they'd say, well, that looks more like a smudge. That can't be a
That's
picture.
fake.
So really, if I'd have carried one on my shoulder to show them a UFO that I've got on my shoulder, they still would never believe it, and so I just gave up. I just send pictures to my friends if I find something, or I post it on my blog. But I don't care anymore about, if they don't want to see it, I don't care.
Yeah, it's what we're in here is not only a great apostasy away from Scripture, but they, at the same time, have somehow gone into a type of denial. And Swanna Jaw used to write about the denial and Denial River that we were that American people were living on the banks of the Denial River and probably going swimming in the Denial River too, because they don't seem to be able to accept anything paranormal or out of the ordinary. They just can't. They won't. And because they won't, then of course they've eliminated a good share of the Bible, which is very paranormal if you read it properly. It talks about the veil, and it talks about doorways through that veil, and it talks about how mankind actually has a veil over their mind so that they cannot see the spiritual part of this thing at all. And it's just amazing what's really happening. But these Mothman sightings, getting back to the paranormal in Chicago, they've got to be a warning of impending doom for Chicago, which, as we have mentioned before, dovetails, of course, into the visions about a huge earthquake in the Midwest. Talking about earthquakes, kind of wandering around here, any more news about this California stuff? It seems to be ever growing, but very silently.
Well, I'll just mention real quick, because I wanted to insert this, that Fox News carried a report from Chicago and Illinois a couple of days ago. I told you about also, we might mention, is the fact that a record number of people in Chicago and Illinois are leaving. They're leaving that area. And so I thought I want to insert that real quick, that maybe if something is coming, a few people are hearing, I don't need to be here anymore. And so with that, the West Coast is there's not the activity you would expect. A lot of it may not be being showed up, but also, too, it looks like there's possibly a building phase. And I know Stan Dale is very concerned about the West Coast, and Dutch Sense also is posting a lot of data, on that situation.
Well, possibly that movie, what was it, 2012, where California kind of breaks off and slides into the sea, is not so far-fetched, because that's what Red Elk claimed. And by the way, folks, we did post Red Elk on our Angel Fall 923 website. So if you want to go visit Red Elk when he came to visit, go look at it. It's kind of scary, though. He had a lot to say. The Lord gave him, he claimed, a vision of about, I guess one could call it almost, the tribulation period. And the invasion of the United States, a pole shift, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he's the one who also claimed that Chicago would be wiped out by a huge inland tsunami out of Lake Michigan. And points to the north, too, would be as well. So, yeah, we posted it on Angel Fall 923. Go see it. And find out why America's Babylon. We got that posted, too. Why America's Babylon is out there. They're all free. I don't charge for them because I can't give them away anyway. And it's just weird. We should probably talk about support. There isn't any, Larry, anymore. This is just no support anymore.
Yeah, it's I really am thankful for the very few that do help me. I couldn't do without you guys. I mean, I'm just saying that to them right now. Without your help, I would not even exist. And I know you're the same, Stuart. But it's not a lot of people. It's just a very few. And it begins. You brought up the scripture about there's a time coming when no man can work, and I'm beginning to wonder, have we stepped into that area?
I think we have. I think we're in an area where freeloading is the nature of the day. It started probably maybe 5 years ago in earnest, where you had freeloaders. They wouldn't mind coming on your site to visit, pick up the news, but they wouldn't even leave a 50-cent piece. And I don't know what's happened. I really don't. I mean, the Lord Jesus Christ said that a servant is worthy of his hire. And if he's worthy of his hire, then people should support it. But I think you're right. I think this is slowly deteriorating because in America it does say in one of the prophecies, and I don't have it in front of me, and I'm not sure if it's Jeremiah or who it is, but they will run from east to west, north to south, to try and find the truth, but it will elude them. And it eludes them because they refuse to support it. And, you know, when you can count on two hands your support, when you have thousands upon thousands of people listening, you got a problem, and they have a problem. And I guess my attitude is, would they go to their employer and say, you know what, I really feel guilty about getting a paycheck, and I really feel guilty about getting all the perks, so for 6 months I'm going to work for nothing. I don't want your perks, I don't want your health insurance, and I don't want any money. Would they do it? Do you think they would?
Well, I'm worried. I'm worried about where we're going with this because of the fact that, you know, you said you got to where you couldn't sell anything anymore. You couldn't ask them to pay for it, and so you begin to put it up free, and then they won't even come look at that. And are they saying that you're not only worth nothing, you're worth less than nothing? I mean, you can't even give it to them. But I find the same thing, Stuart. You remember me going out of my way those times with the vision of the door and consider your ways and
yes.
A number of, I actually did prophetic brochures, and I couldn't even give them away. Every once in a while now I stuff one of those that are over 10 or 12 years old in a thank you note and send it to people, free. So, oh well, we're in the same boat.
Well, I think this thing is accelerating. I don't know what has happened. I don't know why people think that they can do that. They wouldn't do it themselves, so there's a lot of hypocrisy in it. And they wouldn't go to their employer, but they wouldn't mind asking you to work for them for free, and or me. Or the others out there. It's not just you and I. This is an overall trend that's developing, and I'm not sure why. It may be we are entering into this final phase where the truth is just simply going to be shut down because of non-support, or it's going to be shut down because it's totally illegal. Now, I remember when 9/11 came, we lost a ton of people. They ran for cover like rats on a sinking ship, and never did come back. And I think they were just afraid. Well, my attitude is, folks, if you're afraid to support the truth, don't be surprised when the Lord doesn't support you. And that's the way it works. And anyway, it's getting to be a really tough time, and it's liberals. I subscribe to a liberal thing. I hardly ever go to their website, but they are always pleading for money. So the liberal viewpoint, the conservative viewpoint, all of it seems to be heading down. I don't know what's going on. Is this part of an overall slowdown? I mean, Trump keeps trumping that, things are good, the economy's going along great, and you get other people who say, well, maybe it's recovering a little, but not a lot. What do you think? What's the answer to this? I mean, I hate to go file bankrupt, but I may have to.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's just not you and me that and I don't know what I'd have done if the people hadn't helped. I got some help from people that Augusta petitioned, and you certainly petitioned and helped me, with, a few months ago I was in the hole I couldn't dig out of. I had no way physically myself or my wife to crawl out of a hole that deep. We were done. I mean, we were literally done. And thank God, people responded, and really I just have to give it credit to the Lord because I was shocked. And I'm still surviving. I'm still floating above the bills right now on what came in, and of course you know a little bit that came in because it came to you and you helped me with it to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't have made it. But listen, it's not just you or me. You know, this is going. You know, I keep tabs on a number of ministries across the country. You know, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to name them because they may not want to be named. But there's a number of them that really have credible information. They put a lot into their work, and they make videos, DVDs, books, et cetera, and they are all having problems. And I'm beginning to wonder, Stuart, if there isn't almost like I want to, you know, maybe it's a Psalm 2 portion that we haven't seen before. Maybe there is a secret behind-the-scenes censorship and a strangling of what we should have to help us finish the course. Maybe there's something going on behind the scenes we're not aware of that is really strangling off all of the assets that we should have.
Yeah. I mean, I know we're broke here. I mean, there's no question, and I'm in a hole so big I couldn't get out of it even if I tried. And so there's only one option if things don't turn around, and I don't see a turnaround. I think it's going to continue to get worse. I'm not sure what the mindset is of people who want your material, really do want it, really do appreciate it, but can't afford even $1. So it's weird, and it's going to continue, I think, this way for a while. Hopefully not, but maybe Trump can. If we're in for a delay of 3-4 years, who knows?
Well, sure.
Maybe he can turn this thing around. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to mention real quick. I was on a show earlier today with Augusto Perez, and he had a new word from this. I can't remember his name. He's the prophet out of India, Salvaji,
yes.
or anyway.
I know who you mean.
A new word. He was saying that he felt like the Lord had showed him that even though they want to remove Trump by any means, that he is going to, by grace, to this world even, because whatever happens to Trump affects the whole world, that
yes.
he is going to give Trump 4 years no matter what it takes.
Well, that could easily be. You know, I mean, the Lord can hold up his hand and say, wait a minute, no, not yet, you guys. Until Trump is done with Israel and what he's supposed to do for Israel. And I think it deeply involves the temple, the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount, and the recognition of the Sanhedrin. When that stuff is over, then I would say that Trump's job is most likely over. So it's going to get very, very interesting. It's either going to be quite a delay or we're going to have a very short period of time, and things are going to go south very, very rapidly. And the other thing I want to mention to people, too, is the possibility of a, how do I say, the surveillance state appears to be tightening its noose very rapidly, even under Trump. And it's something that maybe you and I could talk about. What about North Korea? Let's get into North Korea, because that's really an enigma. I don't, people say, well, we could have 4 years, we could have 10 years, we could go another 20. And it's possible, but I can't imagine the shape of the world if this is to continue. So what's going on with Kimmy Boy over there? I understand he's going to launch another missile on tomorrow, possibly.
Well, we've got to kind of watch this. The reports earlier in the week was that he was working at his nuke site. Some kind of hectic work was going on there, and also he was prepping a missile that they believe now may be fired Sunday. They're not sure. You never know until he fires them off. But he was also, satellite images showed that he was possibly moving biological or chemical weapons from a site in Pyongyang, moving them across the country, which is not a good deal. But all this is going on. Now, they're talking about a missile launch, possibly, and this is from intel, I think, of South Korea, being set up for maybe a Sunday launch. Nobody knows which way it'll go, but we've got to watch. And I shared with you also, there's a new movie coming out, which is kind of interesting. It's called American Assassin. It's from an old book by Vince Flynn years ago. And very interesting, in the book, there's a scenario where they drop a nuke into the ocean very near one of our carrier groups. And, of course, it's not good what happens. But, I got to thinking, and I talked to you today. I said, you remember when Kim was threatening to drop a nuke over into the ocean? I mean, that's all he said. I'll just drop one off in the ocean. And we've got 3 carrier groups plus ships from France and England and other nations, South Korea and Japan, all out in that ocean he's talking about dropping a nuke in. Could that be a plan?
Sure could. I mean, he knows that his days are numbered unless he reacts. And Trump, you can't really tell who's baiting who, but the biblical thing on it is, surely the least of them shall draw a Babylon America out. So that almost sounds like Kim baiting Trump into a war. And as we have said before, it's probably the first domino to fall, because once the nukes start flying, they're going to start flying everywhere, because people and tribes and nations and tongues, evidently for whatever reason, think they have something to settle a score with somebody else. And the tribe of humankind, well, if it survives at all, would be a very, very small group, as the Bible indicates, because we're fallen. We're a fallen race. And no fallen race is ever going to make it through that. I know you hear all this stuff about different civilizations and how they mature and they get through their phase and then they come out on the other side. If you're fallen, that's pure baloney. Otherwise, Jesus Christ died for absolutely nothing at all. He came here to bail a few people who would do what he said out, and if they won't, they're just counted as the enemy. In fact, humanity is counted as the enemy of the Creator because they are fallen. And there's a reason why Satan is called the prince and power of the air and the Lord of this world, basically. He runs it through the spirit of humanity. And the Lord allows, I guess, this for whatever his agenda is. And I think we're heading in. Don't you feel that the nations are getting more and more uneasy and more restless, like Jesus said they would? It seems like we've entered into that phase.
Yeah, there seems to be a restlessness, almost like a world revolution about ready to happen. Of course, we know that the New World Order is trying to birth its revolution into the New World Order that everybody's talked about, and that's been delayed by Trump, it appears. So, there's a stirring pot going on. At the same time, we've got the North Korea situation, but we've already got Nikki Haley in the UN and Rex Tillerson's, of the State Department addressing the UN today, and we have really begun to take on Iran now. Have you noticed?
Yeah. I think this is part of the overall, scenario of the rich men. They have to have their war. They have to bring in their chaos to bring humanity to the point where they will accept a total, police state. And that moves us kind of into this G5 wave that we've been reading about, and transhumanism, and the advancement of artificial intelligence. It's all starting to come together. What research, and I don't know what you think about it, but here's how I have gelled it down for the G5 wave. It's like a beehive, and you have a queen, which is the central data collection point that gets information and data from all of the bees, which is mankind, collected from all the records. And it reminds me of silent weapons for quiet wars. They track your every move through TV sets, smart meters, iPhones, computers, your bank records, your store purchases, your online activities. All of this is fed into the queen of the hive, and then this queen starts making decisions and sending out its orders. And I've been reading some articles where they think, they're starting a new religion where this queen will be worshipped as God. It sounds really bizarre, but you remember Snowden, and you put people onto that movie that he made or that was made about him. They know everything about everybody. And so when people run for cover because they get scared, there's no way you can run from cover. There isn't any cover. The motto of the Council on Foreign Relations is everywhere. Well, they're talking about this thing that's developing right in front of our face, this beehive situation. And I remember back when I wrote on Independence Day on the blog, I said, what are we independent of? Why are we writing about independence when every move, everything is controlled? Everything is controlled. I was reading an article today where down in Florida, you can't have a vegetable garden in your front yard. It's considered a criminal offense. You go to prison for it. Can you imagine how far this has gone?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and if water falls on your roof, you don't own it.
I don't, but what's wrong with the people? Why are they putting up with this? Like, is this the frog in lukewarm water and we put it up to boiling and he doesn't jump out because he doesn't realize? It's amazing to me.
It could be the frog in the water, and as the water is getting hotter and hotter, anybody pokes him, he says, I can't be disturbed right now. I'm sleeping.
Yeah. Asleep and I don't know, comatose, I guess, is a better word even, because it's a much deeper sleep. And if you try to wake people up, they don't want to be awake. And now, obviously, there are people out there who are wide awake and know exactly what's going on. They try to warn others, but it doesn't really seem to go very far. Otherwise, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be going on. It's kind of like Trump. Now, I noticed that the biometrics and the tightening of this G5 is rapidly coming upon us. And I don't know. A lot of people might think that the G5 is just another advancement, I suppose, of the Internet. But I'm wondering about when they net neutrality gave took the government, I guess, out of regulating it. And, you've got people like Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and I don't know how many others there are, that are actively censoring anything they don't like. It started with, kind of violent rhetoric, but that's not what it is now. They're totally taking down Christian ministries and all kinds of things. Have you heard from anybody? I know Augusto was having all kinds of problems. He was obviously being targeted.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt, they took down, some of his YouTubes and and if you'll remember, let me read a Drudge headline here. This is a recent headline. It says AI, which is artificial intelligence, will allow humans to communicate via telepathy. Scientists report a leading tech company now has developed brain augmentation. And so you've got this stuff already becoming available, and that's when I think the people that are involved in this literally become hybrids. You know, they're going to create hybrid people. And what's interesting, you know, I know that you remember recently we had talked about, and Stan Deo had a report on his website about a social group that had implemented AI, and it was an experiment of some kind, and AI it actually, when it began to interact, it created its own language. They didn't even know what it was saying. It was speaking an artificial intelligent language that it created, not they created it, it created it, and they had to take it down. They got scared. But this is being implemented. You mentioned the G5 and their reports at G5, you know, which has to be a New World Order phase, is basically leaning towards Chinese technology, and we're hearing that a lot of the AI now has been implemented through different groups, you know, Google and others, and it will be coming out through the Internet. This is going to implement everything. And by the way, I just want to mention this and then get your opinion. You know, they're saying now that the AI, in other words, the new wave, if you will, the fourth wave, I believe it is, something to that effect, computers, the quantum computers that are involved with AI have the ability of operating in multiple dimensions.
Yes. In fact, I guess they do, the way the quantum aspect of it. And Putin of Russia, here's a headline. He said, whoever cracks the artificial intelligence will rule the world. That was a warning from Putin. Predicted future wars are going to be fought by drones. Remember the movie Terminator series? People should really watch that and take it to heart what Schwarzenegger and those guys are telling you about, because they're really telling you about what the future is. And you may remember Total Recall, where you bought things and you go kind of on a mental trip. Well, it was paid by social credits, not money, social credits. And then there was Running Man. And these futuristic movies are trying to tell you what is coming. And anyway, here's some more what Putin said. The development of AI raises colossal opportunities and colossal threats. And then there was another headline. Putin warns AI will be the ultimate weapon for world domination. And Google is working on it, because we know Google is CIA, as is Facebook. All of them are. In fact, the NSA chief, I don't know if you remember, when he came out and he said he loved Facebook, Twitter, and all those because it made their work much easier. Well, what does the NSA do? Collect intelligence. Stephen Hawking, warning about artificial intelligence. Legendary astrophysicist, author, cosmologist Stephen Hawking has written an article that warns about the dangers of artificial intelligence. He looks at the way technology is moving forward and what predictions have been made about the future. So he knows that this is a problem, and it is taking over. And I believe that this ties right into what I read on the Mark of the Beast. This is going to be AI implemented. It's all part of this data web collection, the beehive and the queen. This is really what all this is. The last few years have seen the widespread recognition that sophisticated AI is under development. Gates, Hawkins, and others have warned of the rise of super intelligent machines. AIs that can outthink the smartest humans in every domain, including common sense, reasoning, and social skills. Superintelligence could destroy us, they caution. So I think this is all part of this biblical prophecies of the end times. What do you think?
Well, I think that's very interesting. It kind of perked my interest when you mentioned Stephen Hawking, because a Drudge Report headline says mystery alien interstellar object could be some type of craft or ship. And I saw a report today where Stephen Hawking is working with some other scientists to actually try to probe signals from that craft that came by that looked like a cigar.
Yes.
And they say it's interstellar. Matter of fact, when you look at the crashed craft on the moon, the Mona Lisa craft, as they called it, it looks just like it. What do you think?
I agree with you 100%. It looks exactly like it. And here's a headline, too. Strange tumbling motion of cigar-shaped interstellar comet suggests it's an alien probe with a possibly broken engine, says leading astronomer. So, remember the bot said, and I doubt if this is it, but it might be a forerunner of it, because it came fairly close to Earth, said that a large spaceship was going to be seen. And they were kind of an intergalactic cruise, like we take an ocean cruise. Now, that hasn't happened yet, and maybe it never will, but it was kind of interesting that the bots came up with that. However, what they do is they probe changes in language, and then they project that into the future. They could be talking about this thing, because more and more people are beginning to wonder if this isn't an intelligent probe.
You know, while you're mentioning that, Stuart, remember a few years, maybe 10 years ago, we talked about the Black Knight satellite, which we couldn't have put into orbit. It was an ancient satellite, possibly when before the flood that circled Earth. And remember, they said it was still signaling. It was still sending transmissions into space. Could it possibly have been sending to the probe information?
Yeah, that's a good question. You might remember the Star Trek series. You remember the one where a probe came in and started to destroy the world?
Yeah, Voyager.
And all that was the first one. This one was a probe, and it was starting to destroy the world, and Captain Kirk and his group figured out that what it really wanted was it was looking for whales. Remember that one?
Yeah, that's the one, though. Remember, it was the Voyager. They called it Voyager, but it was the Voyager probe that was doing this.
Okay, that might be. I can't remember all the details, but I do remember they went back in time, collected a whale, and brought it back. So I don't know. I mean, we're looking into things that are really, really strange. But folks, the last days are going to be so strange you wouldn't believe it even if it was told to you. So here's another headline: artificially intelligent robots could soon gain consciousness and rebel against humans to eliminate us, scientists warn. Many scientists believe that AI robots could soon gain consciousness. This could allow them to complete dangerous missions in combat or in space, but it could also swing the other way and lead the killer robots to kill us. What do you think of that?
Well, it reminds me a little bit of it reminds me of the story of how Larry Taylor one day went to the store and bought himself a computer. And when he brought the computer home and realized it was his computer and he hooked it up to the internet, he began to find out immediately he didn't own any of it. It operated on its own and somebody else was always working with it.
Yeah, that's about it. And I don't think people realize exactly how policed, how controlled they really, really are. And you wanted to mention Tithonia or Mars, too, before we got off. We got about 10 minutes. you were having some visions about Mars at the same time that I was investigating this place called Tithonia. And I was trying to remember how I got onto that, but I think somebody sent me a link to coordinates. And when I saw it, at first I didn't really see much, but as I began to look at it, it began to pop out. This is an artificial made structure, a whole bunch of structures. Actually, it's kind of a city, which is why I nicknamed it Tithonia City, because it has very advanced technology along with very ancient technology, easily seen. And then I went to Malin Space Systems and downloaded that particular area, and poof, there it was, right there. And so I began to investigate that. I did a movie on it called Red Star, and nobody wanted it. Remember when we were going to launch, you called up and said it was going to be a non-event, which it was. But during that time, you were also having visions and being taken there to see things. Would you describe some of that?
Yeah, what was so interesting about that was I began to actually go there, not in my own physical body, but I was taken by the Lord, and I was shown things, and I would come back, after each, and I had about 7 or 8 of those experiences as you was working on Red Star, but I didn't know that because you never told me you even had that. That was a secret that you were doing, and so every time I called and told you about an experience on Mars that I had, it linked in with what you were working on, even the tunnels beneath.
Yeah, it was total confirmation that what we were seeing was actually the truth. In the Red Star film, you can clearly see 2 circular, I guess people would call them UFOs, sitting on a ramp right there in plain sight. And we're up there. There's no question we're up there. We're on the moon. And didn't you say that Trump had just said something about sending people back to the moon and Mars?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, here it is. It's from Yahoo News. Let me read this. It says, this was a few days ago. It was kind of quietly done. It says President Trump signed directive ordering NASA to return to the moon and move towards Mars.
Well, it's kind of like the NASA space shuttle. That's for popular consumption. That's for the masses of the world to consume. Meanwhile, most people don't realize that NASA had a secret space program. And, of course, we have the consortiums that are running the Illuminati's black projects. And Stan Deyo has told us about a lot of that, and some of them are operating evidently out of Antarctica, which is kind of strange when we have all these new reports about what they have found down there in Antarctica. Evidently an advanced race that got frozen in a pole shift, which it would do. It would freeze anything instantaneously, which is why the mammoth still had vegetation in their mouth, but they're deep frozen. When you have a pole shift, the very cold, you can't even call it air, it's basically space, comes down to the surface and quick freezes anything it hits. And I think we're going to find out a lot of stuff. I was kind of interested in why, though, our Project Red Star never went anywhere, and no one ever wanted to really look at it. We couldn't give it away. Why do you think that was? I would have thought there'd be a little interest in that, seeing as how Mars is probably in our immediate future.
I think, Stuart, that you had probably a deep intel resistance operating behind the scenes you didn't know about, because remember later on we found out, and matter of fact, John Lear took a copy of that, to Art Bell and asked him. And Art Bell said, "Yeah, I know about it, but I can't talk about it. Can't talk about it on the radio."
They wouldn't.
Remember,
He wouldn't.
later on we found out from a guy in Italy that is on the inside of some Apollo missions that they actually was a Project Red Sun, a deep black project people didn't know about, and I think the name Red Star and Red Sun crashed you, is what I think.
That's probably right. I hadn't really thought about that, but yes, Project Red Sun, and that was a Mars probe. And you may recall when not Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, what was it? Alternative 3. In that thing that they produced over in Britain, they had a Mars landing way back. I think it was in the 60s, early 70s. And as they touched down, they found life there. And so the whole thing is very, very strange. And Alternative 3, that particular broadcast from the BBC, I think it was a BBC broadcast, was immediately removed. And then they came out and said, well, the whole thing was just a joke.
Yeah, well, I was going to tell you, though, if you'll remember, Barry Rothman ran Torah codes that showed life on Mars. He's even got some images. And I received an email from him the other day that he has recently come under heavy, heavy attack, cyber attack, and, they're really gleaning everything he's even thinking. And so he's pretty quiet at the moment. But I was going to mention also, remember Phobos, Mars, one of the moons of Mars? You remember the Russian probe that went over there, and it took a picture of a cigar-shaped object just before it went silent?
Yeah, very much elongated like what just came through here. And very much like what looked like where they found the Mona Lisa when they sent a crew up there. They're all over the place. Stephen Greer has been trying to warn people about this for years, and his main warning is that the industrial complex, the military-industrial complex, has indeed done what President Eisenhower warned us about, that they would soon take over, and they would control everything, and they do. But not for long. I think we're at the final point of things, that we're in that pivot area. Speaking about pivot, in Iran and Israel and Saudi Arabia, they're still moving troops. This looks like it's going to go anytime, right?
Oh, yeah. This thing is, there's a lot of movement, and we're probably about out of time, so we'll just have to continue to watch the Middle East because there's a lot of activity over there.
Okay. Well, folks out there, things are going to have to change here on Night Shadows. I don't exactly know how all of this is going to work out, but we are in trouble, and we do appreciate, and I know Larry does, appreciate the very few that do support us. And without their support, I wouldn't even be talking to you right now. And we do appreciate it. And if the truth is worth anything, then please help, because you can't do this for nothing. It all costs a lot of money. And Larry, thanks again for coming on, and we'll try and get back on Monday or Wednesday, depending on how things go. And thanks everybody for listening. And again, thank you for the support that the few of you have shown. We really appreciate it. And as I said, without you, we wouldn't even be talking now. And this is a heads up. We are not out of Hanukkah yet. And a lot of things can happen around the Hanukkah holidays. So keep your eyes on North Korea, Iran, and especially here in the United States, because the United States has been invaded, and we don't know when they're going to rise up, as the Bible says, and cause the mischief that brings us down. Anyway, again, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week, the Lord willing.